The courtroom was unusually silent for a Friday morning in Indianapolis. Sunlight streamed through tall, arched windows, casting golden stripes across polished wooden benches. The air smelled faintly of coffee and old books, mingled with the faint scent of floor wax. Spectators fidgeted quietly, the occasional cough breaking the tense hum that hovered like static electricity. At the front of the room, 7-year-old Avery Parker sat on a small chair next to the witness stand, her legs swinging nervously. Her tiny fingers gripped the leash of Jasper, a golden retriever whose amber eyes seemed almost human in their intensity. Jasper sat perfectly still, ears perked, tail resting but twitching occasionally, as if sensing the invisible currents of tension surrounding them. Avery's parents sat behind her, hands clasped tightly together, knuckles white. Her mother's eyes were wide and watery, darting nervously to Avery's trembling hands. Her father's jaw was tight, lips pressed into a thin line, eyes locked on the judge as if willing him to speed through the proceedings. This wasn't just another hearing. This was the culmination of months of fear, anxiety, and sleepless nights. Avery had witnessed something that had haunted her for months, something that no child should ever see. Prosecutors had struggled to bring it to light, and the defendant, a man whose name alone sent chills through Avery's small body, sat at the far table, flipping through a legal pad with a calmness that made everyone else uncomfortable. The judge, an imposing man in his early 60s, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat, signaling that the hearing was about to begin. Avery swallowed hard, feeling Jasper's steady presence against her side. She could feel his muscles tense, the slight pressure of his body reassuring and grounding her at the same time. Her parents exchanged a brief, anxious glance. They knew their daughter had been through enough, but seeing her like this, small, fragile, yet so determined, stirred something in them they hadn't felt before: awe. The defendant looked up briefly, his gaze briefly meeting Avery's, and for a moment the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Avery's heart pounded, every nerve on high alert. Jasper's ears flicked toward the man, his stance stiffening subtly. Avery, fully aware of Jasper's reactions, placed her small hand on the dog's collar, her fingers brushing softly against the thick fur. There was a silent understanding between them, a language only they spoke. Avery had taught Jasper signals, tiny, almost imperceptible gestures that conveyed complex emotions: fear, calm, danger. And now she made one without thinking. A light, fleeting touch on Jasper's neck, a slight downward motion, a signal for imminent danger. Almost instantly, Jasper shifted. His amber eyes locked on the defendant, muscles coiled like springs. The judge paused mid-sentence, noticing the dog's sudden tension. He squinted over the rim of his glasses, clearly puzzled. The attorneys and court staff exchanged subtle glances. What on earth could have caused the dog to react so abruptly in a room that had been eerily calm just seconds before? Avery's mother leaned forward, whispering her daughter's name, but Avery barely noticed. She was focused entirely on Jasper, feeling the almost imperceptible tremor in his shoulders, the way his tail had stiffened slightly. She had taught Jasper to respond to her signals, and Jasper never made mistakes. Never. The judge, now visibly curious, leaned forward. "Miss Parker," he said slowly, his voice calm but commanding, "why is your dog reacting this way?" Avery's throat tightened, and for a moment she felt frozen. The courtroom seemed to close in around her. Spectators shifted in their seats, all eyes on the small girl and her dog. She looked down at Jasper, his gaze unwavering, and whispered under her breath, almost inaudible, "It's him." The judge froze, his pen hovering above the notepad. "It who?" he asked, brow furrowing. Avery's small hand brushed the collar again, a subtle repeat of the first signal. Jasper's growl was low and quiet, but it was unmistakable, a warning only those attuned to him could perceive. Gasps rippled softly through the crowd, and the defendant's composure faltered ever so slightly. The judge's eyes narrowed, scanning the room, sensing the shift in atmosphere, though he could not yet understand its cause. Avery's father leaned forward, whispering for his daughter to calm down, but she ignored him. She trusted Jasper completely. She had done so countless times before. This wasn't fear of the courtroom, the judge, or the people around her. It was fear of him, the man she had seen that fateful night, the one who had vanished after that incident, leaving Avery haunted with memories no child should endure. And now he was in the courtroom. Jasper's muscles tensed further, his tail flicking in small, sharp movements. He stepped slightly forward, nudging Avery toward the edge of the witness stand. Avery's stomach churned. She knew she only had a few seconds before the tension in the room escalated beyond control. She swallowed hard, lifted her small hand, and gave one final, almost invisible gesture to Jasper, a signal that screamed without words, "Prepare. Danger is near." The judge, sensing the sudden weight in the room, put a hand up. "Everyone hold your positions," he said, his voice steady but firm. The bailiff paused mid-step, confusion flickering across his face. The defendant, seated at the far table, shifted uneasily, his hand twitching slightly near his notes. The entire courtroom seemed to freeze, the air thick with anticipation, fear, and a tension that could almost be sliced with a knife. Avery's parents were paralyzed with worry. The whispers of the crowd faded into silence. The sunbeam streaking across the polished wood of the floor seemed to spotlight the small girl and her dog, highlighting the unspoken connection between them, a connection that transcended words, authority, and reason. Jasper's growl deepened, resonating in the still air, and Avery's eyes darted toward the far corner of the courtroom. And that's when it happened. The judge's hand paused midair, hovering above his gavel. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a cautious whisper, almost to himself. "Do you mean he's here?" Avery's lips trembled. She nodded slowly, barely able to speak. "Yes, he's here," she whispered, her voice cracking. Her small hands gripped Jasper tighter. Jasper's eyes, fixed and unwavering, never left the shadowed corner near the exit door. Every person in the courtroom felt the sudden shift, the chill that raced up their spines. The ordinary morning in Indiana had become a tense, fragile moment suspended on the edge of something no one could yet name. The judge slowly rose from his bench, adjusting his robe. His voice carried authority but also an edge of disbelief. "Bailiff, secure the exits, now." The bailiff moved quickly, calling out to officers stationed at the doors. Avery's heart raced. Jasper pressed his body closer to her side, every muscle coiled like a spring. She knew somehow, she just knew, that the signal she had given was no mistake. Something was about to happen, something dangerous. Something that would change the course of this day, and perhaps their lives, forever. And in that frozen, golden-lit moment, the entire courtroom held its collective breath, waiting for the next move. And for a 7-year-old girl and her loyal dog, nothing would ever be the same again. The courtroom, once a place of quiet order, now throbbed with a tension that seemed almost alive. Spectators leaned forward, eyes wide, whispers suspended in the air like fragile glass about to shatter. Avery's mother clutched her husband's hand, trembling so hard it nearly tore their grip. Avery herself stayed rigid, small hand still on Jasper's collar, her amber-eyed companion's entire body coiled with alertness. This wasn't a dog reacting to noise, a sudden movement, or a stranger in the room. This was instinct, honed over years of training, and paired with Avery's subtle signal, a silent gesture she had only used when she truly feared someone. Jasper shifted forward, muscles taut, eyes locked on the far corner of the room. The defendant, seated at his table, suddenly straightened, sensing the change in the atmosphere. He glanced briefly at Avery, lips pressing into a thin, calculated line. The attorneys froze mid-note, the stenographer's fingers hesitating over the keys. The bailiff, catching the movement, straightened, glancing toward the judge for instruction. The judge himself leaned forward on the bench, eyes narrowing. His voice, calm but carrying the weight of authority, cut through the murmurs. "Miss Parker, explain why your dog is reacting this way." Avery swallowed hard, her throat tight as a vice. Her words trembled slightly as they escaped. "Because he's here." Silence exploded in the courtroom. It wasn't the kind of silence that signals calm. It was thick, heavy, electric, a silence that made the skin crawl. Every eye shifted toward the back of the room, toward a shadowed corner where the hallway light barely reached. Avery's parents gasped, leaning forward, trying to see what their daughter's small voice had revealed. The judge motioned for the bailiff to move closer, but the older officer hesitated. There was something in Jasper's body language, a primal warning, that stopped even trained law enforcement in their tracks. The defendant's face tightened. A bead of sweat ran down his temple, though his posture remained unnervingly composed. He flicked his eyes toward the judge, perhaps realizing for the first time that the game had shifted. He had believed himself invisible, confident that months of careful evasion would protect him. But Avery's silent signal had undone that confidence in seconds. Her gesture, imperceptible to anyone else, had triggered Jasper's reaction, a reaction no one could ignore. The judge's gaze swept the room, landing on each officer, then back on Avery. "Show me," he said carefully, his voice measured but urgent. "Where?" Avery's small hand trembled as she pointed toward the corner near the courtroom's side exit. "There," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost lost amid the shuffling of papers and the quiet hum of nervous breaths, but the gravity of her words anchored everyone's attention. The bailiff inched toward the indicated spot, eyes darting nervously, hand on his holster. Jasper growled, a deep rumble vibrating through his chest, low but unmistakable, a sound that seemed almost like a human warning. "Do not come closer." The man seated at the defendant's table shifted again, hands now gripping the edge of his notes so tightly that his knuckles were white. Every nerve in the room screamed that something was about to erupt. Avery's father leaned forward, voice tight. "Avery, stay calm. It's going to be okay." Avery shook her head, eyes unwavering. "Jasper knows," she said firmly, almost defiantly. "He always knows." Her tiny fingers brushed once more against Jasper's collar, the signal repeated with precision. Jasper stiffened, moving slightly closer to Avery, tail straightening, ears flicking toward the shadow. He was no longer a passive companion. He was a protector, an alert, living barrier between Avery and the man who had haunted her nights. The judge, now fully aware that this was no ordinary courtroom moment, leaned forward, hands gripping the edge of the bench. "Bailiff, secure all exits. Now, no one leaves, no one enters." His voice, though calm, carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had faced chaos before. Officers moved swiftly, blocking doors, eyes scanning the benches and hallways. The murmurs of the spectators faded to a tense hush. Even the defendant seemed to hesitate, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. Avery's mother clutched her child's shoulders, whispering, "It's okay, we're here, you're safe." But Avery's gaze never left the corner. Her instincts, honed through months of fear and training with Jasper, told her that this wasn't just a coincidence. This wasn't just fear. Danger was close, closer than anyone in the room could see. Suddenly, Jasper's growl deepened, resonating like a warning bell in the quiet courtroom. The defendant stiffened, his hands gripping his notes like a lifeline. And then, as if on cue, he began to rise slowly from his chair, his eyes narrowing, scanning the courtroom. The judge immediately called out, "Sir, remain seated." The man paused, hesitation flickering across his face. For a heartbeat, everyone believed he might comply. But then, just as Avery had feared, his movement didn't stop. The man's eyes darted toward the corner where Jasper and Avery were focused, and he froze, a shadow of recognition crossing his features. His lips twisted into a subtle, unreadable expression. Avery's stomach knotted. "Jasper," she whispered sharply, the command clear in its urgency. The dog pressed closer, nudging Avery toward safety while keeping his gaze locked on the man. Every hair on Jasper's back was raised, his posture rigid. The low growl emanating from him wasn't just sound. It was a statement, a line drawn that no one could ignore. The judge, noticing the tension, adjusted his glasses and leaned toward the court reporter. "Have the cameras been alerted? Security?" The clerk nodded frantically, eyes wide. The entire courtroom had transformed from a place of order into a trap of suspense, and no one fully understood what was about to unfold. Avery's father whispered, "Sweetheart, it's going to be okay. Jasper, here." Avery only nodded, tight-lipped, hands gripping the leash like it was a lifeline. The dog's unwavering attention, the silent communication between them, and the raw instinct to protect made her feel both terrified and invincible at the same time. Then came the moment that shattered the fragile calm. Jasper took a step forward, ears forward, muscles taut, and growled louder, a warning that carried through the entire room. The defendant froze completely. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. For the first time in months, he looked truly exposed, truly vulnerable. The judge, sensing the impending eruption, slammed his gavel lightly. "Bailiff, step forward," he commanded. Officers moved quickly toward the man, but the tension in the air was almost unbearable. Jasper's growl didn't subside. His gaze remained locked on the figure who had tormented Avery's life. Spectators held their breath, the low hum of anticipation vibrating through the wooden floorboards, echoing in every corner of the courtroom. Avery's whispered words, almost lost in the tension, carried a weight no one could ignore. "He's here," she repeated, voice small but unyielding. The judge's eyes widened. He had dealt with countless cases in his career, but rarely had he witnessed a child's intuition manifest with such clarity. "Did you know he would be here?" he asked, voice tense. Avery shook her head, eyes wide, small hand still on Jasper's collar. "No, but I felt it." Jasper knew. The courtroom held its collective breath, the seconds stretching impossibly long. Every person in the room could feel the tension crackling in the air like a live wire. The defendant's face had gone pale, jaw tight, and his hands were trembling slightly as he slowly backed away from the table toward the shadowed corner near the side exit. The judge slammed the gavel again, louder this time. "Hold your positions," he ordered, eyes sharp. "Do not move." And in that instant, with the defendant's escape looming and Jasper poised to act, everyone in the courtroom realized something terrifying. The danger they had feared for months was no longer a story or a memory. It was here. It was real. And it was about to explode into chaos. Avery's fingers tightened on Jasper's leash. Her heartbeat thundered in her chest. She glanced at her parents, then back at the corner where the man had frozen, and whispered, "Jasper, be ready." And just as the courtroom seemed to hold its breath on the edge of disaster, the defendant shifted suddenly, his hand disappearing into the folds of his jacket. The room froze. The moment hung suspended in midair, every eye locked, every muscle tensed. What was he reaching for? A weapon? A note? Something else entirely? And that's when Jasper growled again, louder, warning everyone that the next second could change everything. The courtroom was frozen in a fragile, tense silence that seemed to stretch every second into eternity. Avery Parker's small fingers still gripped Jasper's leash, her knuckles white, and the golden retriever remained rigid, ears forward, muscles coiled as if he could spring across the room in an instant. Every person in the courtroom, judges, lawyers, bailiffs, spectators, felt it. The moment had shifted. This wasn't a rehearsal, a hypothetical, or a figure from a report anymore. This was real, and the danger had arrived. Avery's breath came in short, trembling bursts. Her amber eyes were wide but focused, locking on a shadowed figure near the side exit, where the sun barely reached, leaving his features hidden in half-darkness. The man's posture was stiff, deliberate, almost predatory. His hand twitched near his jacket pocket, the tiniest motion, but enough for Jasper to stiffen even further. Avery whispered the words that made every adult in the courtroom turn. "He's here." A gasp rippled from the back rows, muffled but unmistakable. Spectators instinctively leaned forward, craning to catch a glimpse of the man Avery had feared for months. Some murmured to their neighbors, voices shaky. "Who is that? Why is he here?" Avery's parents were rooted to their seats, hearts pounding, eyes wide with panic and disbelief. Her father whispered nearly inaudibly, that can't be him." But Avery didn't speak. She couldn't. Her gaze never wavered from the figure who had haunted her nightmares. The judge, standing now fully from the bench, slammed a hand on the wooden rail. "Bailiff, security, lock the exits immediately." His voice echoed through the courtroom, snapping the tense energy into action. Officers surged toward the doors while spectators shifted nervously, unsure whether to rise or stay seated. The defendant, already pale, beads of sweat forming along his forehead, froze when he realized the court had mobilized. His lips twitched in an imperceptible smirk, but his eyes betrayed fear, a flicker of recognition as he caught sight of Avery and Jasper. Jasper growled low and threatening, the sound vibrating through the polished courtroom floorboards. He stepped forward, coiling his muscular body like a spring. Avery instinctively leaned closer, small hands tightening on the leash, silently guiding him to maintain focus. "Stay," she whispered, her voice barely audible but firm. Jasper obeyed, eyes never leaving the man. The defendant's hand twitched again toward his jacket. The murmurs in the room grew louder, spectators straining to see, and lawyers exchanged worried glances. The tension was so thick it pressed against everyone's chests. Then, in a move that seemed almost deliberate, the man slowly rose from his chair, head lowered slightly. His steps were deliberate, cautious, but purposeful. Avery's heart hammered. She whispered another small signal to Jasper, an almost invisible flick of her wrist, and the dog's stance changed, ready to protect, ready to intercept. The judge leaned forward, voice stern but cautious. "Sir, remain seated. Step away from the child and her service dog immediately." The man paused, hands still in his jacket. He glanced around the room, eyes darting, calculating. He knew he was exposed, that every adult present was now on high alert, but something in him didn't break. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if evaluating the threat, measuring Avery and Jasper. Every instinct in the room screamed danger. Avery's small body shivered but remained rooted, eyes never leaving the figure. Jasper's growl escalated, a low, menacing rumble warning that the calm, orderly courtroom had just become a battlefield. The judge motioned toward the bailiff. "Approach carefully, do not provoke him." The officer stepped forward, gun holstered, stance firm. The defendant froze, his breathing shallow, eyes locked on Avery. For a brief, frozen moment, it was as if time had stopped entirely. Then, almost imperceptibly, the man reached into his jacket with a single hand. Every heartbeat in the room skipped. Avery's mother gasped, clutching her chest. Her father's face went pale, eyes wide with panic. Spectators held their breath. The judge's voice cut the silence. "Sir, remove your hand from your jacket now." The man's eyes flicked down at the small girl, and for a heartbeat, a twisted smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You saw me," he said softly, almost in disbelief. His voice, though low, carried a chilling familiarity. "You remember me from that night." Avery swallowed hard, whispering another subtle signal to Jasper, a downward flick of the wrist, sharp but small. The golden retriever's muscles tensed further, growl deepening. The man's eyes followed the movement, and for the first time a flicker of fear crossed his face. He hesitated, half turning toward the judge and officers. "You are under observation," the judge said, voice firm and unyielding. "Do not move. Any sudden motion will be considered a threat." The man remained frozen, one hand still in his jacket pocket, the other gripping the edge of the table. Then, almost imperceptibly, he took a small step toward the side exit. The room reacted instantly. Officers moved, cameras zoomed in, and spectators murmured nervously. Avery's heart leapt into her throat. Jasper growled louder, the warning now clear and unmistakable. Avery's fingers tightened on his leash, her small voice barely above a whisper. He's going to run." The judge's hand shot up. "Do not let him leave, bailiff." But before anyone could react further, the man pivoted toward the shadowed corner near the exit. In a movement so fast it seemed impossible, he dropped his hand into his jacket and pulled out something, a small, metallic object. The sunlight caught it, reflecting sharply into the eyes of those nearest, and a collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Jasper leapt forward, the leash straining against Avery's hands. She yelled, her voice cracking, "Jasper, stop!" But the dog's instincts had already taken over. He planted himself squarely between Avery and the man, teeth bared, growl vibrating through the wooden floor. The defendant froze, eyes locking with Avery, and for the first time he seemed unsure. The man's hand wavered, caught between what he intended to do and the small child's unwavering gaze. Avery, heart pounding, whispered another command to Jasper, a signal of danger, yes, but also of control. The dog shifted slightly, coiling but staying just at her side, ready to act if needed, ready to defend her with every ounce of strength. The courtroom erupted into chaos, but Avery remained focused, her small figure and Jasper the eye of a storm that no one could predict. Officers moved closer, weapons holstered but hands ready, cameras recording every tense second. The judge, standing at the bench, slammed his gavel for attention. "Step back. Everyone hold your positions." And in that tense, electric moment, Avery whispered the words that made everyone's blood run cold. "He's not just here, he's looking for someone else." The courtroom froze again. Murmurs died instantly. The judge leaned forward, voice sharp with disbelief and urgency. "What do you mean, Miss Parker?" Avery's amber eyes never left the man. "He didn't come for me," she said, her voice trembling but steady. "He came for someone else, and if he finds them—" Her words trailed off, swallowed by the weight of the moment. Jasper growled, body tense, a living warning that the danger was still very real. The man, realizing that his presence was now known, began to back toward the corner, eyes darting to every person in the room. For the first time, his control faltered. Officers advanced cautiously, the judge barked instructions, and Jasper remained coiled, unwavering, his small partner at the center. The air was thick with anticipation, every heartbeat echoing against the polished wood, every breath held in fear of what would come next. The entire courtroom waited, suspended in a tension that could snap at any moment, knowing one small move could set off chaos or worse. The hallway outside the courtroom was narrow, polished tile reflecting the morning light from small windows near the ceiling. Every step the defendant took seemed calculated, but there was a subtle tremor in his movements, a hesitation born of awareness that he was no longer in control. Avery's heart thudded violently in her chest as she leaned closer to Jasper, whispering, "Stay, stay." The golden retriever pressed his massive body against her, muscles coiled, teeth barely visible as he growled, low and threatening, vibrating like a living bass line of warning through the silent hallway. The judge had called for security, but officers were still positioning themselves at the exits when the defendant finally moved decisively toward the side door. Avery's parents froze, panic etched across their faces. Her father lunged slightly, but the bailiff caught his arm and shook his head. Any sudden movement could trigger disaster. Avery, small yet determined, knew she had only moments. Jasper's ears flicked forward and the dog lunged slightly, warning both the man and the officers. "Do not underestimate us." "Stop," the judge barked from the courtroom, but the defendant ignored the command, his focus entirely on the side exit. Every muscle in his body was taut, like a predator cornering its prey. His hand brushed against his jacket pocket once more, and a collective intake of breath swept through the courtroom. The spectators were frozen in a mix of fear and morbid fascination. Children clutched parents' hands, lawyers glanced nervously at one another, and even the bailiff's usually calm expression betrayed tension. Jasper growled louder, a deep, resonant sound that filled the hallway, warning the man of imminent consequences. Avery's small hand brushed his collar in a reassuring motion, a subtle command only he could understand. Jasper's growl softened slightly, but his body remained coiled, ready to act instantly. Avery whispered almost inaudibly, "He's not just leaving, he's looking for someone. You have to stop him." The man's steps faltered as he realized the dog would not let him pass without resistance. He froze for a heartbeat, eyes darting nervously toward Avery, his jaw tightening. Officers closed in, hands hovering near holsters but careful not to provoke a violent response. Then, as if he had made a sudden decision, the man bolted, pushing the emergency door open. The metallic clang echoed down the corridor. Jasper surged forward, leash taut in Avery's hands. She stumbled slightly but held on, urging him to chase, to intercept. "Jasper, go," she whispered, voice trembling with adrenaline and fear. The golden retriever leapt ahead, powerful paws striking the polished floor, tail high and stiff, eyes locked on the fleeing figure. His growl morphed into a bark, sharp and commanding, cutting through the echoes of the hall. The bailiff lunged, trying to intercept, but the man was surprisingly fast, ducking and weaving down the narrow corridor. Spectators pressed against walls, some ducking instinctively, others frozen in disbelief. Avery's mother covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks, while her father muttered frantic prayers under his breath. The judge had followed at a distance, moving swiftly but cautiously, eyes trained on the unfolding chase. Jasper's powerful stride closed the distance, and Avery could feel the dog's excitement mixed with intense focus. This wasn't play, this was a mission. Every sense in Jasper's body screamed danger, yet he moved with precision, anticipating every dodge and pivot of the fleeing man. The emergency door creaked open fully, revealing the glare of sunlight from the hallway outside. The man glanced over his shoulder, panic flickering in his eyes for the first time. Avery's small voice rang out again. "Jasper, corner him." The dog's massive body changed course, angling toward the maintenance door near the exit stairwell. The man skidded slightly, eyes widening, realizing that Jasper's movement was calculated, deliberate. He had underestimated the bond between the child and the dog, an instinctual understanding that allowed the golden retriever to predict the suspect's every step. The officers closed in on both sides, but the hallway was too narrow for a smooth capture. Jasper intercepted the man just as he reached the maintenance door. Teeth bared, growl resonating like thunder, Jasper planted himself firmly, blocking the man's path. Avery gasped, clutching the leash with all her strength, her small body shaking with fear and adrenaline. "Drop your hands," an officer shouted, voice echoing down the corridor. The man froze, one hand still in his jacket pocket. For the first time, his confidence shattered, replaced by hesitation. Jasper's low growl escalated, warning of imminent physical action. Avery whispered sharply, "Now, Jasper." The golden retriever lunged, not attacking violently, but forcing the man backward, causing him to stumble against the wall. Officers were on him instantly, pinning his arms and securing his jacket. The metallic object that had caused such fear clattered to the floor. The crowd in the courtroom and hallway collectively exhaled in relief, yet the tension did not dissipate. Avery's parents rushed forward, hugging their daughter as she clung to Jasper's thick fur. The judge approached, eyes wide, voice calm but tinged with awe. "Miss Parker, did your dog know he was here before anyone else?" Avery nodded, chest heaving. "Yes. I gave him the signal, he knew." Officers carefully searched the man and removed a small, metallic device, an old, weathered locket that Avery recognized immediately. She had lost it months ago, the night the man had disappeared. Her hands shook as she realized the gravity. Not only had he been in the courthouse, but he had brought a piece of her past, an object tied to memories she had tried to bury. The man, now fully restrained, spat bitterly at the ground. "You don't understand," he hissed, eyes darting from Avery to Jasper. "I wasn't here for you." His voice trembled with a mix of anger and fear. Every officer remained alert, holstered hands ready. Spectators, once frozen with panic, now murmured, trying to comprehend what had just unfolded. Avery's mother clutched her daughter tightly. "Who was he looking for?" she whispered, voice shaking. Avery's small hand still held Jasper's leash. She stared at the restrained man, eyes narrowing. "I don't know, but it wasn't me," she said softly. Her voice carried a strength that belied her 7 years, a resilience forged in fear, now crystallized in the aftermath of danger. The judge, though composed, exhaled slowly, visibly shaken. He motioned for officers to remove the man from the courthouse. "He will remain in custody until we fully understand his intentions," the judge ordered, voice firm. Yet his gaze lingered on Avery, then on Jasper, silently acknowledging the incredible bond and courage that had just prevented what could have been a disaster. As the man was led away, he turned his head one last time toward Avery, lips twisting in a cryptic smile. "This isn't over," he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear. Avery shivered, heart hammering, clutching Jasper. The golden retriever leaned against her, eyes softening but still alert. Avery's father wrapped his arms around both his wife and daughter, whispering reassurances that still felt fragile in the tense air. "You're safe now," he said, though even he didn't fully believe it. Avery hugged Jasper tightly, feeling the warmth of his fur, the steady beat of his heart, the unshakable presence that had protected her when adults could not. The judge, back at the bench, called for a short recess, giving everyone a moment to collect themselves. But Avery's mind was already racing ahead, instincts warning her that the danger was not fully over. The man's cryptic words echoed in her ears. "This isn't over." Jasper's ears flicked, tail stiffening slightly, sensing the lingering tension. Avery whispered a quiet command, "Stay close, Jasper." The dog nuzzled her, aware of the unspoken message. Even though the immediate threat had been contained, the story and the danger was far from finished. Outside the courtroom, the sun streamed into the hallway, but the warmth did little to dispel the cold reality. The man had been bold enough to enter the courthouse, bold enough to bring a part of Avery's past with him, and bold enough to imply there was someone else still at risk. Every officer, every spectator, every parent in the room understood it intuitively. This day had not ended. Not really. And Avery, small but fierce, held Jasper's leash tightly, eyes scanning every corner, every shadow, every door. She had survived the first wave, but her instincts, and Jasper's unerring sense, told her the next challenge was already approaching. The courthouse, once a symbol of order and law, now felt like a stage set for a story that no one could predict. And in that charged, electric air, every heart in the building waited, knowing the next moment could change everything again. The courthouse had returned to a tense, fragile calm, but it was only surface level. Spectators whispered among themselves, glancing nervously at the hallway where officers were still escorting the restrained man toward a holding room. Avery Parker, small but unyielding, remained tightly gripping Jasper's leash. The golden retriever's amber eyes scanned every shadow, every corner, muscles still coiled and ready. Though the immediate threat had been temporarily contained, Avery's instincts screamed that the danger was far from over. Her father knelt beside her, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "You did incredible," he whispered, voice trembling with pride and fear. Avery's eyes didn't leave the officers walking the man down the hallway. "It's not over," she murmured, her small fingers still gripping Jasper's collar. Jasper responded instantly, pressing against her, as if understanding every word. The judge had returned to the bench, attempting to restore order, but the tension lingered thickly. His eyes scanned the room repeatedly, noting every movement. He knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary, a child and her dog neutralizing a threat that could have been catastrophic. But he also knew the man's cryptic words couldn't be ignored. "This isn't over." The defendant, now in handcuffs, was led down the hallway toward the holding area. His movements were deliberate but measured, his head slightly bowed, eyes darting from side to side. Officers flanked him, weapons holstered but ready, eyes scanning for any sudden motion. Jasper followed Avery closely, alert to every microshift in the man's posture, growling softly under his breath. Suddenly, the restrained man's eyes flicked toward a stairwell exit, barely noticeable in the crowded hallway. His head jerked slightly, almost imperceptibly, signaling to someone or something outside. Avery felt a chill run down her spine. She leaned close to Jasper and whispered another subtle command, "Stay alert." The golden retriever stiffened further, muscles taut as a coiled spring. "Wait," the judge said sharply, standing again. "Hold him here. Now." His voice carried urgency, but it was clear the man might be planning something unexpected. Officers tightened their grip, but the man twisted subtly in their hold, enough to make everyone instinctively step back. Avery's heart pounded violently as she realized the man might have allies, or that he wasn't finished with his plan. The hallway doors suddenly burst open and sunlight flooded the corridor. A shadow flickered across the tiles, moving fast. Avery's pulse leapt. Jasper barked, powerful and commanding, and lunged forward despite the leash, eyes fixed on the movement. Spectators gasped, officers reacted, and the man tensed violently. "What the?" an officer shouted, but before he could finish, a second figure darted from the shadows, racing toward the stairwell. Avery's instincts screamed that this wasn't random, it was coordinated. She tugged on Jasper's leash slightly, signaling him to intercept. The dog obeyed instantly, charging toward the intruder with the speed and precision of a predator. The restrained man's eyes widened in shock. "No, stop," he shouted, but his voice was lost amidst the clatter of rushing feet and barking. Officers scrambled to control both the restrained man and the new threat, creating a chaotic scene that seemed impossible to contain. Spectators were ushered backward, some stumbling over benches in panic, while the judge called for calm, his voice cutting through the chaos like a sharp blade. Avery's mother grabbed her hands, trying to pull her toward safety, but Avery held firm. She knew Jasper could handle it, but she also knew this new figure represented unknown danger. "Jasper, stay sharp," she whispered, the words barely audible. The golden retriever's growl deepened, warning both the restrained man and the intruder that he was ready for whatever came next. The intruder suddenly stumbled near the stairwell, giving Jasper the opening he needed. The dog surged forward, body low and powerful, and blocked the escape route. The restrained man's accomplice froze, eyes wide with fear, realizing that a child's dog had become the final obstacle between freedom and capture. Avery's heartbeat thundered in her chest as she felt the adrenaline surging through her veins. Officers moved quickly, pinning the intruder against the wall, but not before a brief, tense struggle. The restrained man, seeing his plan falter, lunged toward the stairwell again, but Jasper barked sharply, teeth bared. The sound reverberated through the hallway, halting the man instantly. He froze, realizing that his escape plan was now completely compromised. Avery's mother finally guided her to a safer spot, but Avery stayed rooted, still gripping Jasper's leash. She could feel the dog's tension, the barely restrained power that would spring into action at the slightest threat. "He's not done yet," she murmured. "I can feel it." The judge, finally moving closer, surveyed the scene with a mix of awe and disbelief. "Miss Parker," he said, voice low but intense, "did your dog know there would be another person involved?" Avery nodded slightly, still focused on Jasper and the restrained man. "He sensed someone else was helping him," she said. "Jasper always knows when there's more danger." Officers began securing both the restrained man and his accomplice, double-checking their weapons, pockets, and movements. Spectators, still holding their collective breath, whispered nervously. Children clutched parents' hands, lawyers exchanged anxious glances, and the judge finally called the room to order. Yet even as calm returned superficially, Avery felt the lingering tension. She knew instinctively that this was only the beginning, that the men had a plan that hadn't yet fully revealed itself. Avery's father knelt beside her again, voice shaking. "Honey, you've done more than anyone could imagine. You were incredible." Avery swallowed hard, glancing at Jasper, whose amber eyes still flicked toward the restrained men. "It's not over," she whispered. "He came here for a reason. I don't know what, but it's not over." The judge, observing the girl's insight, placed a hand on his desk, breathing deeply. "We need to understand the motive," he said aloud. "Clearly, there's more at play here than a simple escape." Officers nodded, beginning the careful process of securing the hallway and courthouse, but even they seemed to acknowledge that the real story had not yet been revealed. Jasper, now calm but still alert, pressed gently against Avery's leg. She patted his head, murmuring, "Good boy, you did it." But the tension in her chest didn't fully release. The man's cryptic words, "This isn't over," echoed in her mind. The gold locket in his possession, the mysterious accomplice, the rapid, deliberate escape attempt, all signs that Avery and Jasper's journey was far from finished. As officers led the men down the hall to temporary holding, Avery glanced back at the courtroom. Spectators were murmuring, whispers growing louder. The judge called for order again, but even he couldn't mask the unease that lingered in the air. The courthouse had survived one wave of chaos, but Avery could feel it in her bones. The storm was not yet past. Jasper leaned against her, a comforting presence, and she whispered, "We'll be ready, boy. No matter what comes next, we'll be ready." The dog's tail flicked, a subtle acknowledgement, his amber eyes still scanning the area for potential threats. Avery's parents watched their daughter with a mixture of pride, relief, and lingering fear. They knew she had saved the day, but they also understood she sensed something far larger lurking beneath the surface. And in that charged, fragile moment, Avery realized one undeniable truth. This courthouse, this day, and her life had been forever changed. The man had come for someone or something beyond her, but his intentions remained a mystery. And as she held Jasper's leash tighter, she knew instinctively that their story and the danger was far from over. The courthouse had returned to a deceptive calm. Officers escorted the restrained man and his accomplice to a holding room, but the tension in the air remained palpable. Spectators whispered nervously, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Avery Parker sat on the bench, her fingers tightly gripping Jasper's leash. The golden retriever rested against her legs but remained alert, amber eyes scanning every shadow, every hallway. Though the immediate threat had been contained, Avery could feel that the danger had only deepened. Her parents flanked her, both tense and pale, yet full of pride. "You were incredible," her mother whispered, brushing tears from her cheeks. Avery nodded slightly but said nothing. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying the man's cryptic words, "This isn't over." Her instincts screamed that the day's events were merely a prelude, a small glimpse of something far more sinister. The judge, finally regaining composure, called for quiet and ordered officers to investigate the restrained men thoroughly. "We need answers now," he said, voice firm, commanding attention. "Who are they? Why did they come here? And what is the significance of that necklace?" He gestured toward the small, metallic locket which had been retrieved from the man's jacket. Avery's gaze fell on the locket. Her fingers twitched instinctively. That necklace was hers, a keepsake she had lost months ago during the terrifying night when her life had changed forever. She had never expected it to resurface, much less in the hands of the man who had caused her so much fear. Now, seeing it in a place tied to the courthouse, she felt an icy chill creep up her spine. It was more than a personal item. It was a signal, a message, a breadcrumb leading somewhere dangerous. An officer carefully opened the holding room door, allowing Avery, her parents, and Jasper to move closer under strict supervision. Avery's father guided her forward, whispering reassurances, though his own face betrayed worry. "Stay calm, sweetie. We're with you." Avery nodded, glancing at Jasper, who pressed close to her side, muscles still coiled, ready to respond to her smallest signal. The restrained man's eyes locked onto Avery as she approached. There was a mixture of anger and something more complicated, fear, perhaps, or recognition. You have no idea what you're involved in," he spat bitterly, voice low, yet carrying an unmistakable edge. Avery's heart pounded, but she stayed rooted, gripping Jasper's leash. She could sense the danger radiating from him, but she also knew that fear had to be controlled. The judge motioned for Avery to remain calm and ordered officers to remove the man's accomplice for questioning separately. Avery's mother whispered, "Stay strong, baby. Just answer what you know." Avery nodded. She focused on the locket, then on Jasper. The dog's gaze never left the restrained man, amber eyes sharp, muscles still tensed with anticipation. Avery stepped closer. "That necklace, it's mine," she said, voice small but unwavering. The man's eyes flickered briefly toward the locket, revealing a flash of recognition, anger, even panic, hidden behind carefully controlled expressions. "It was supposed to stay lost," he muttered, almost to himself. "You weren't supposed to have it, not now." Jasper growled low in response, warning the man without any doubt. Avery's fingers tightened on the leash. "What do you mean? Why did you bring it here?" Her voice trembled slightly, but she refused to look away. The man's face darkened. "That necklace, it's a key," he said, voice low, almost conspiratorial. "It's a key to something bigger, something that doesn't involve you, little girl, but they will come for it, and they will come for you." Avery's stomach tightened. Her mind raced. Who's coming? What could this necklace possibly unlock? She glanced at Jasper, whose body coiled subtly, every sense alert. The golden retriever growled softly, a warning that the danger was far from over. The judge, sensing the rising stakes, stepped forward. "Explain what you mean, and do so immediately," he said, his tone sharp. "Your vague threats are unacceptable. This is a federal building, and we have no intention of allowing threats against a child or anyone else." The man sneered slightly but didn't answer immediately. His gaze flicked toward the exit hallway as if calculating his next move. Avery's instincts screamed that he still had more plans, even while restrained. She leaned closer to Jasper, whispering a subtle signal, "Stay ready." The dog's ears flicked and muscles tensed, anticipating danger. Suddenly, the restrained man's accomplice returned, escorted by 2 officers. The judge demanded that both men be fully searched and interrogated. The accomplice, slightly younger, had a nervous edge, his eyes darting toward Avery and Jasper. There was an unmistakable tension in the air, like a rope stretched to its breaking point. Avery's pulse quickened. She knew instinctively that the necklace wasn't just a keepsake, it was a target. One of the officers carefully laid the locket on the judge's bench. Avery's fingers twitched, wanting to reach for it, but she knew she had to wait. Her gaze remained locked on the restrained man. "Who will come for it?" she asked quietly, voice trembling. "Why does it matter?" The man's expression darkened further. "They're not like us. They don't care about laws, judges, or courthouses. They only care about power." His voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "That necklace, it belonged to someone important, someone powerful, and now it's back in play." Avery's mind spun. Powerful? Someone important? What does that have to do with me? She glanced down at Jasper, whose gaze remained fixed on the restrained man. The dog growled low, a primal warning that the tension wasn't over. Avery's instincts screamed that the story was far larger than the courthouse, far larger than the men in handcuffs. The judge exhaled slowly, adjusting his glasses. "This requires federal authorities," he said firmly. "We need experts to investigate the significance of this object and ensure no further danger comes to anyone in this building." Avery's father knelt beside her. "Sweetheart, you did everything right. You were so brave." Avery nodded, but her amber eyes were fixed on the restrained man. She whispered softly to Jasper, "It's not over. I can feel it." Jasper leaned closer, pressing his body against hers, tail stiff but controlled. The restrained man's eyes followed them. "You think this ends here. You have no idea what's coming," he muttered. The words sent a chill through Avery's spine. She tightened her grip on Jasper's leash. The golden retriever growled again, a warning resonating in the room. Avery whispered, almost imperceptibly, "Be ready." The judge called for a temporary recess, ensuring the child and her dog were escorted to safety while authorities investigated. But Avery could sense the tension in the air, the electric charge that refused to dissipate. The locket, the man, the cryptic warnings, they were all pieces of a puzzle far bigger than anyone in the room could understand. As Avery left the courtroom with Jasper by her side, her mother whispering reassurances, she glanced back. The restrained man's eyes followed her, lips curling into a cryptic smile. "This isn't over." The words echoed in her mind, mingling with the growl of Jasper, who remained vigilant. Avery knew instinctively that the next confrontation was inevitable, and that whatever awaited them would be far more dangerous than anything they had faced so far. And in that charged, quiet moment, Avery felt the weight of the truth. The necklace was not just a keepsake. It was a key to something powerful, something dangerous. And they were in the middle of it, her, Jasper, and the cryptic threat that loomed just beyond the courthouse walls. The courthouse, once a symbol of calm authority, now felt like a stage set for danger. Avery Parker clutched Jasper's leash tightly as she followed her parents through the secured hallway. The golden retriever's amber eyes scanned every corner, muscles taut, ears flicking at every sound. The cryptic warnings of the restrained man echoed in her mind. This isn't over. She knew instinctively he wasn't exaggerating. Something far larger and more dangerous was at play, and the necklace, the locket that had once been hers, was the epicenter. Officers had escorted the men to a secure room, but Avery could feel the tension lingering, coiled like a spring in every corner. Her father whispered reassurances, voice tight with worry. "Honey, you've done more than anyone could imagine. You're safe now." Avery nodded, but her mind raced. Safe? No, not yet. She glanced down at Jasper, who pressed close to her, tail stiff, growl low and warning. The judge returned to the bench, papers shuffled nervously before him. "We need answers," he said firmly. "This necklace, its history, significance, someone needs to investigate immediately, and the men will remain in custody until we know more." His eyes flicked toward Avery, a silent acknowledgement of her bravery, but his composed demeanor couldn't mask the underlying tension. Avery's mother tugged gently at her arm. "Let's go sit for a moment, sweetie." Avery followed, but she couldn't stop glancing back toward the secured hallway. Something prickled at the back of her neck, a sixth sense, sharpened by fear, experience, and Jasper's unerring instincts. Her small voice barely above a whisper, she murmured, "Something's here, not in the room, but close." Jasper's ears twitched. The dog shifted slightly, positioning himself between Avery and the corridor. His growl was low but insistent, a warning that danger had not yet passed. Avery's parents looked at her nervously. "What do you mean, baby?" her father asked. She shook her head slightly. "I don't know, but Jasper knows." Suddenly, a loud metallic clatter echoed from the side hallway. Spectators and officers turned sharply toward the sound. Avery's heart leapt. Jasper barked sharply, powerful and commanding, ears forward, tail stiff. The restrained men inside the holding room froze, eyes wide. Avery's pulse raced as she realized what her instincts had already told her. Someone else was in the building, moving silently, strategically, and their intentions were dark. The judge called out, voice steady but tense. "Security, investigate immediately. All entrances are locked. No one leaves." Officers surged toward the hallway, weapons holstered but ready. Avery's mother gripped her hand tightly, but Avery remained focused, leaning subtly toward Jasper. "Stay close. Stay ready." The dog's muscles coiled further, ready to react to the slightest sign of threat. From the shadows of the side hallway, a figure emerged, moving with deliberate stealth. Avery squinted. The intruder's face was partially obscured, a hood casting darkness across his features. He carried something small in his hands, something metallic that caught the light and glimmered ominously. The golden retriever growled, stepping closer to Avery instinctively. The judge barked, "Stop, halt immediately." But the figure didn't slow. Officers moved to intercept, but the hallway was narrow, forcing a tense standoff. Spectators held their breath, watching as the figure shifted his weight, eyes flicking toward the secured men in the holding room and then, suddenly, toward Avery. Avery's heart thumped violently in her chest. "Jasper, stay alert," she whispered. The dog stiffened further, a silent sentinel ready to defend her at a moment's notice. Avery could feel her adrenaline spike, every nerve on high alert. She glanced at the figure in the shadowed hallway. Something about his movements, his focus, felt deliberate. He wasn't just passing through, he was searching for something. And she instinctively knew what it was, the locket. The intruder's eyes flicked toward Avery, recognition dawning. For a heartbeat, his movements froze. Then, almost imperceptibly, he reached into his pocket, fingers brushing against the small metallic object. Jasper growled, a deep, vibrating warning, while Avery instinctively pressed herself closer to the dog. "Step away," an officer shouted, moving to intercept. The intruder's movements were sudden now, swift and calculated. The metallic object glinted in his hand, a small silver key, unmistakably part of the locket Avery had lost months ago. The realization struck her like a thunderclap. The locket wasn't just a keepsake, it was a key. A key to something larger, far more dangerous, and this intruder knew exactly how to use it. Jasper surged forward, muscles taut, teeth bared, not to attack recklessly but to block, to warn, to protect. Avery's fingers tightened on the leash, guiding him subtly. The intruder stumbled slightly, caught off guard by the dog's precision and instinctive timing. Officers closed in from both sides, but the intruder shifted rapidly, eyes darting between escape routes, and Avery realized he might have an accomplice outside the hallway, coordinating his movements. Her mother whispered frantically, "Avery, stay back." But Avery's amber eyes remained fixed on the intruder. She knew she had to be the first to signal Jasper, the first to read the situation. Her instincts screamed that hesitation could cost everything. Suddenly, the intruder lunged forward, but Jasper's reaction was instantaneous. The golden retriever blocked the path, pressing his massive body against the figure. The metallic key clattered to the floor. Avery's pulse hammered, and she whispered a soft, urgent signal, "Hold him." Jasper's growl deepened, the low rumble a warning to both the intruder and the officers. The intruder froze, realizing his escape had been thwarted. Officers pounced, pinning him to the ground. Spectators gasped, some whispering in relief, others in fear. Avery's father clutched her tightly and her mother wiped tears from her cheeks. But Avery remained focused, glancing at Jasper. The dog's amber eyes flicked toward the holding room. Something inside her clicked. "The locket," she whispered, voice small but steady. "It's not just about me, it's about what it opens." The judge stepped forward, eyes narrowing, voice sharp. "Explain, Miss Parker." Avery swallowed hard. "It's a key to something powerful, that's why they're here. They're not just after the locket, they're after what it unlocks." A ripple of tension spread through the courtroom. Officers glanced nervously at each other. The restrained men in the holding room stiffened. Even the spectators felt the gravity of her words. Avery's instincts had been correct all along. The danger wasn't contained, and the necklace was the linchpin. Jasper pressed against her, growling softly, sensing the lingering threat. Avery whispered a quiet command, "Stay ready." The golden retriever responded instantly, muscles coiled, eyes fixed on every potential danger. Avery's pulse raced, knowing instinctively that the final confrontation was looming. And then from the shadows beyond the holding room, a new sound echoed, a whisper, metallic, deliberate. Avery's amber eyes widened. "They're coming," her instincts screamed, and Jasper's growl escalated. The judge called for calm, but the tension in the air was electric. The courthouse had survived one wave of chaos, but Avery knew with certainty that the storm was far from over. The locket had been found. The intruders had been restrained. But Avery and Jasper understood something no one else did. The true danger, the ultimate target, was yet to appear. The courthouse trembled with a tension that felt almost tangible. Avery Parker gripped Jasper's leash, her small hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The golden retriever's amber eyes scanned the hallway, muscles coiled like a spring, tail stiff, ears alert. The intruder lay restrained, officers on full alert, yet Avery instinctively knew that the danger hadn't ended. The metallic locket, the key, glimmered faintly on the judge's bench, its significance heavier than anyone in the room could comprehend. Avery's mother whispered frantically at her side, but Avery's amber eyes were fixed, unwavering, trained on every shadow, every flicker of movement. Her instincts screamed that someone or something was still inside the courthouse. Jasper pressed closer, growl low, warning of an unseen threat. Avery's pulse raced. "They're here, I can feel it," she thought. Suddenly, a faint shuffle echoed from the far hallway near the security doors. Avery's heart leapt. Jasper's ears twitched, growl escalating into a low, resonant warning. The judge slammed his hand on the bench. "All security personnel immediately investigate." Officers surged toward the hallway, weapons holstered but ready. Spectators leaned forward, some craning their necks, fear and curiosity mixing in equal measure. Avery's father clutched her shoulder. "Honey, stay close." Avery nodded, hands tightening on the leash. Jasper pressed against her, muscles coiled, ready to react to the slightest movement. Avery leaned forward slightly, whispering a subtle, silent signal, a flick of her wrist and a tilt of her hand. Jasper responded instantly, a silent understanding that only they shared. The bond between child and dog had become the fulcrum on which the day's survival now depended. From the shadowed hallway, a figure emerged, moving quickly yet carefully. Avery's pulse hammered as she realized the intruder had an accomplice, someone even more dangerous, unseen until now. The figure's hands glinted with a metallic object, something small but ominously significant. The golden retriever growled, teeth bared, and lunged slightly forward, blocking the figure's path instinctively. "Stop right there," an officer shouted, but the figure froze for only a heartbeat. In that split second, Avery leaned slightly to the side, signaling Jasper with a nearly imperceptible flick of her hand. The dog understood perfectly. In a blur of coordinated motion, Jasper surged forward, intercepting the intruder before he could advance further. The intruder stumbled backward, caught completely off guard by the dog's speed and precision. Officers rushed to restrain him, but Avery's eyes remained on the locket, the tiny key that had drawn so much danger into their lives. She realized with a sudden clarity that the locket was more than a keepsake. It was a map, a key to something far more powerful than any of them had imagined. The restrained men in the holding room stared in disbelief as Jasper blocked the intruder's path, growl vibrating through the polished courthouse floors. Avery whispered another subtle signal, her small fingers deftly moving along the leash. The dog shifted, moving closer to the intruder, body low, eyes sharp, ready to strike, but only to protect, not to attack. The intruder froze, realizing he had underestimated the bond between child and dog. Sweat beaded on his forehead as officers approached from both sides. Avery's mother clutched her hands to her mouth, eyes wide, while her father whispered fervent prayers under his breath. The judge, tense but composed, called out instructions, directing officers with precision, yet unable to mask the awe in his expression. Avery's pulse thundered in her chest. "We're not safe yet. Something is still missing," she thought. Her amber eyes flicked to the locket, then to Jasper. The dog's low growl reminded her, even though the immediate threat had been intercepted, the true danger, the reason these men had risked entering the courthouse, was still unresolved. And then, in a moment so small it almost went unnoticed, Avery realized the truth. The locket wasn't just a key, it was a signal. She had worn it the day she lost it, and its reappearance was deliberate. Someone had sent it back into her life, forcing a chain of events that had led here. The signal, "It's not over because it's meant to lead them to me," she realized. Her pulse spiked. Jasper growled again, shifting closer, sensing the mounting danger. Avery whispered a single silent gesture, a flick of her wrist and tilt of her hand. The dog understood instantly. With a fluid motion, Jasper advanced, blocking the intruder completely and forcing him to halt. Avery's small voice rang out, clear and commanding despite its size. "Stop. Now." The intruder froze, eyes wide with disbelief. Officers pounced, restraining him fully. The metallic key clattered to the floor. Avery's heart raced as she bent slightly, glancing at the glimmering object. The locket, safe at last, pulsed faintly in the light, as if acknowledging its role in the day's chaos. The restrained men were secured, their accomplice subdued. Officers double-checked the building, ensuring no additional threats lingered. Spectators slowly exhaled, some crying, some whispering in awe. Avery's parents rushed forward, hugging their daughter tightly. "You did it, baby. You and Jasper, you saved everyone," her mother said, voice trembling with relief. Avery nodded, chest heaving, amber eyes still scanning the room. Jasper pressed close to her, tail stiff but now relaxed, eyes softening slightly. Avery ran her fingers along his fur, whispering softly, "Good boy, you were amazing." The dog nuzzled her, body warm and reassuring, a silent acknowledgement that the danger had been neutralized. The judge stepped forward, voice firm but gentle. "Miss Parker, Your bravery and presence of mind were extraordinary. You and your dog have prevented what could have been a disaster today. The authorities will fully investigate the significance of this locket, and the men involved will face justice." His eyes lingered on Avery, admiration clear. "But I believe we all understand one truth. Courage can come from the smallest among us, and loyalty can save lives in ways we cannot always predict." Avery's father knelt beside her, brushing hair from her face. "You were amazing, sweetheart. You stayed calm, focused, and brave. I can't imagine anyone else in your place handling this so well." Avery glanced down at Jasper, amber eyes glistening, heart swelling with gratitude and pride. The dog leaned against her, a living shield, a reminder of the bond that had carried them through danger. Outside the courtroom, sunlight streamed in, casting long shadows across the polished floor. The chaos of the day had subsided, replaced by an uneasy calm. The metallic locket, once lost, now rested safely in Avery's hands. Its significance remained a mystery, but for the moment, its role in saving lives was undeniable. Avery's mother held her hands, whispering again, "We're so proud of you, baby. You were incredible." Avery nodded silently, still processing the adrenaline and fear of the past hours. She looked down at Jasper, whose tail flicked gently, eyes soft but alert, muscles still ready. "We survived," she thought, "but we will always be ready." The judge called for a final recess, ensuring all security measures were reinforced. Officers moved swiftly, coordinating with authorities outside the courthouse, confirming that the building and everyone inside were safe. Spectators slowly filtered out, murmuring about the extraordinary courage of a small child and her loyal dog. Avery remained seated on the bench, Jasper at her side, chest heaving, mind racing. She realized that the day had tested her in ways no child should face, but it had also revealed an unbreakable bond, an unshakable instinct, and a courage beyond her years. And though the threat had been neutralized, Avery knew deep in her bones that the locket, the cryptic warnings, and the shadows that had moved within the courthouse were all part of something larger, something that would test her again. But with Jasper by her side, she felt ready. She had faced the darkness, and together they had emerged victorious. A final glance toward the holding room revealed the restrained men, fully subdued, and the courthouse returning to order. Avery tightened her grip on Jasper's leash and whispered softly, "We did it, boy, we stopped them, but we'll always be ready." Jasper leaned against her, a silent guardian, his amber eyes reflecting the bond, the bravery, and the promise of protection that had carried them through the most terrifying day of their lives. The courthouse, once a place of routine law and order, now bore witness to a story of courage, instinct, and loyalty. A story in which a small girl and her dog had altered the course of danger with nothing more than a silent signal and unbreakable trust. And somewhere beyond the walls of the courthouse, the echoes of that silent signal lingered, a warning and a promise. No threat would go unnoticed. No danger would go unchallenged. Not while Avery Parker and Jasper remained vigilant.